The war tactics classroom was full of noise. 60 cadets from 12 different worlds sat in the big round room, all talking at once. Some had forearms, others had scales instead of skin. A few had eyes that glowed in the dark. But they all wore the same gray uniform of the Galactic Military Academy. Professor Zekthara walked to the front of the room. She was tall and thin, with purple skin and 6 fingers on each hand. Her species, the Veltarians, were known across the galaxy for being smart fighters. When she raised one hand, all the talking stopped. "Today we study real battles," she said. Her voice came through a small machine that changed her words into sounds every species could understand. "You will see footage from 3 years ago. What you watch changed how we think about war." The lights went dark. Blue light filled the air as machines projected images all around them. The cadets could see everything like they were really there. Some of them had never seen this kind of technology before and looked around with wide eyes. "This is the siege of Kepler Station," Professor Zekthara said. "Our forces were trapped. No way out. No help coming. The enemy had 10 soldiers for every one of ours." The footage began to play. It was not clear and sometimes shook badly. The cadets could see a space station under attack. Ships flew around it, shooting bright beams of energy. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Inside the station, soldiers ran through hallways. Many were hurt. Others looked scared. Jake Morrison sat in the back row, trying not to draw attention. He was the only human in the class. His skin was pale compared to most others, and he had brown hair that was always messy no matter how much he tried to fix it. Jake kept his head down and hoped nobody would notice him. "Watch carefully," the professor said. The station was about to fall. Then something impossible happened. On the screen, a young soldier appeared. He looked very young, maybe 20 years old. His uniform was dirty and torn. There was blood on his face, but he was still moving. The computer showed his species name at the bottom of the screen. It said human. Jake felt his heart start beating faster. He knew what was coming next. The human soldier on the screen started doing things that made no sense. When enemy fighters came down a hallway, he did not run away. Instead, he used broken pieces of the wall to block their path. When his friends got hurt, he ran right through enemy fire to help them. He should have died 10 times, but somehow he kept going. "Look at this part," Professor Zekthara said, pointing at the screen. "This individual has no formal training in advanced tactics. Yet watch what happens." The human soldier was talking to other defenders. He was telling them to do strange things. "Move boxes here. Break that wall there. Use this broken machine as a weapon." Nothing he said was in any military book, but it worked. Somehow it all worked. The most amazing part came when the enemies broke through the main door. Everyone thought it was over. The human soldier looked at his friends, then at the enemies, then back at his friends. Without saying a word, he picked up a big gun and ran straight at the enemy. Not to the side, not for cover, but straight at them, yelling as loud as he could. It should have been suicide. Every military expert said so later. But the enemies were so surprised that they stopped shooting for just a moment. In that moment, the human soldier reached them and started fighting with his hands. Other defenders saw this and felt brave enough to help. The tide of battle turned. The cadets watched in complete silence. Even the ones who usually whispered during class were paying attention. They saw the human soldier fight for hours. Every time someone got hurt, he helped them. Every time the enemies pushed forward, he found a new way to stop them. He never seemed to get tired, and he never seemed to give up. A Caraxian cadet named Dex leaned over to his friend.
"How is he still alive?"
he whispered. Jake heard this but did not answer. He remembered being very scared that day. He remembered thinking he was going to die every few minutes. But he also remembered that other people needed help, and he was the only one who could give it. The footage showed the end of the battle. Help finally arrived from other parts of the galaxy. When they got to the station, they found something nobody expected. The enemies were running away, and the station was still under friendly control. Bodies were everywhere, but most of them were enemy bodies. The human soldier was sitting against a wall, bandaging another soldier's wound. He looked up when the rescue team arrived and gave a small smile. Then he went back to helping the wounded person. "This individual saved over 3,000 lives," Professor Zekthara said as the footage ended. Military experts still study these recordings. They want to understand how one person changed everything. The lights came back on. Every cadet was staring at the front of the room. They had all heard stories about humans before, but most had never seen one fight. The stories always seemed too strange to be true. The human species is still new to our alliance, the professor continued. We do not know much about them. But this footage shows us something important. When humans are desperate, they become very dangerous. An Altherian cadet raised her hand. Professor, is this footage real? It seems impossible. The footage has been checked many times, Professor Zekthara replied. It is completely real. This human soldier had no special training, no special weapons, no special help. Yet he did something our best generals thought could not be done. Jake tried to make himself smaller in his seat. He could feel some of the other cadets looking at him. Being the only human in the academy meant everyone was curious about his species. After watching the footage, that curiosity would be much stronger. What happened to this soldier? Asked Rax, a Veltarian upperclassman. He had 4 arms and always seemed angry about something. Where is he now? The official records are private, Professor Zekthara said. But I can tell you he survived. After Kepler Station, he was offered many honors, but he chose to return to normal service. Normal service. Rax sounded confused. After doing something like this? Why would anyone choose to be ordinary again? Jake knew the answer to that question, but he could not say it out loud. He had not wanted to be special. He had not wanted to be famous. All he wanted was to help people and then go back to his regular life. But the galaxy had other ideas. Perhaps, Professor Zekthara said, that choice tells us something else important about humans. They do extraordinary things, but they do not always want to be seen as extraordinary. The class time was ending. Cadets started putting away their notes and getting ready to leave. Jake began to stand up, hoping to get out before anyone asked him questions about humans. Before you go, Professor Zekthara called out, I want you all to think about something. This human soldier was barely older than you are now. He had no more training than you have. What he had was something else. Something that made him keep fighting when everyone else had given up. What was it? Asked Kira, a quiet Zephyrian cadet. Professor Zekthara looked around the room, her eyes passing over Jake for just a moment longer than the others. I think that is what we need to learn about humans, she said. They seem to have something inside them that will not let them quit when others are counting on them. The cadets filed out of the room, all of them talking excitedly about what they had seen. Jake waited until most of them were gone before standing up. As he walked toward the door, he heard fragments of conversation. Do you think all humans fight like that? Maybe it was just luck. No way that was luck. Did you see how he moved? I heard humans are crazy. Maybe that is their secret. Jake walked faster, trying to get away from the voices, but he knew it was too late. The footage had been shown, and now everyone would be thinking about humans differently. They would all be wondering if the quiet human cadet in their classes had that same strange fire inside him. As Jake reached his room, he looked at himself in the mirror. He saw the same face that had been on the screen, just 3 years older and without the dirt and blood. He wondered if his classmates would figure it out and what would happen when they did. Jake walked quickly down the long hallway outside the classroom. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. All around him, other cadets were talking in excited voices about the footage they had just seen. He tried to walk faster, but the hallway was crowded. Did you see how that human moved? Said a voice behind him. Jake recognized it as Dex, the Caraxian cadet who sat 2 rows in front of him. He was like a machine that never stopped working. My father fought in the border wars, replied another voice. He always said humans were unpredictable. Now I know what he meant. Jake kept his head down and tried to blend in with the crowd, but that was hard to do when he was the only human in sight. His pale skin and brown hair stood out among all the different alien features around him. Some cadets had blue skin, others had scales, and a few had extra arms or eyes. Jake looked very ordinary compared to them, which usually helped him stay unnoticed. Today was different. Hey, Morrison, called a loud voice from behind. Jake's heart sank. He turned around and saw Rax pushing through the crowd toward him. The Veltarian upperclassman was bigger than most cadets and used his forearms to move people out of his way. Wait up, Rax said when he reached Jake. Several other cadets stopped to watch what would happen. Rax was known for picking fights with younger cadets, especially ones from species he did not like. What do you want, Rax? Jake asked. He tried to keep his voice calm and normal. I want to talk about that footage we just saw, Rax said with a nasty smile. Pretty amazing stuff, right? Though I have to wonder if it was really true. More cadets started gathering around them. Jake could see curiosity in their eyes. Some looked excited, others looked worried. Everyone knew that when Rax started talking to someone in the hallway, trouble usually followed. What do you mean? Jake asked, though he was pretty sure he knew where this was going. I mean, Rax said, spreading all four arms wide. Humans love to tell stories about themselves. They make movies about their wars, write books about their heroes, create legends about their past. How do we know this footage was not just another human story? Professor Zekthara said it was real, replied Kira, the quiet Zephyrian cadet. She had been walking behind them and stopped when she heard the conversation. Of course she did, Rax laughed. But professors can be wrong. And humans are very good at making fake videos look real. My cousin works in digital media. He says humans have been doing it for hundreds of years. Jake felt his hands tighten into fists. He forced himself to relax. Getting angry would only make things worse. Why would anyone fake something like that? Asked Lynn, an Altherian cadet with big round eyes. To make humans look better than they really are, Rax said. Think about it. Humans are new to the galactic community. They want everyone to think they are strong and brave. What better way than to create fake footage of impossible heroics? That soldier saved 3,000 lives, Kira said softly. Why would someone lie about that? Because, Rax replied, it makes humans seem special. It makes other species respect them. But I think the truth is much simpler. Humans are just like everyone else. Maybe a little weaker, maybe a little more scared. Jake could not stay quiet anymore. You do not know what you are talking about. Rax's eyes lit up with interest. Oh, really? And how would you know, Morrison? You are human. So of course you want to defend your own species. But have you ever been in a real battle? Have you ever seen actual combat? The crowd of cadets grew larger. Jake could see at least 20 faces now, all watching him and waiting for his answer. Some looked curious, others looked entertained. A few looked worried about where this conversation was heading. I know that footage was real, Jake said carefully. The professor verified it. Military experts have studied it. Just because something seems impossible does not mean it is fake. Easy words, Rax said with a sneer. But words are cheap. Actions matter. And the truth is, none of us have ever seen a human do anything like what was in that footage. Have we, Morrison? Jake felt trapped. If he said humans were not special, he would be lying and insulting his own species. If he said humans were capable of great things, Rax would ask him to prove it. Either way, he would draw more attention to himself. Every species has individuals who can do amazing things under the right conditions, Jake said finally. Humans are not different from anyone else in that way. Nice diplomatic answer, Rax said. But you still have not answered my question. Have you ever seen a human do something extraordinary? The crowd pressed closer. Jake could feel their eyes on him, waiting for his response. He thought about the Battle of Kepler Station, about the fear and desperation he had felt, about the impossible choices he had made. But he could not talk about any of that. I have seen humans do their duty, he said. Just like I have seen Veltarians do their duty, and Caraxians and Altherians. Good people do good things when they have to. How boring, Rax said, and how typical of humans to avoid giving real answers. What kind of answer do you want? Jake asked, starting to get frustrated. I want you to admit that your species is not special. Rax said, I want you to stop pretending that one piece of suspicious footage makes humans into legendary warriors. I want some honesty. Jake felt his temper rising. 3 years of staying quiet, 3 years of trying to blend in, 3 years of letting people like Rax say whatever they wanted about humans. It was getting harder to stay calm. You want honesty? Jake said, his voice getting louder. Fine. Humans do not think they are special. Most of the time we are just trying to do the right thing. But when someone needs help, we help them. When someone is in danger, we try to save them. Not because we are heroes, but because it is the right thing to do. Pretty words again, Rax said. But where is the proof? The proof is in that footage you think is fake, Jake snapped. The proof is in every human who has ever put themselves at risk to help others. The proof is in the fact that we joined this academy not to prove we are better than anyone else, but to learn how to protect people. One human joined this academy, Rax corrected. You. And so far all you have shown us is that humans are good at making speeches. The crowd was getting restless. Some cadets looked uncomfortable with how aggressive Rax was being. Others seemed to be enjoying the conflict. Jake realized that no matter what he said, Rax would twist it into something negative. You know what? Jake said. Believe whatever you want about humans. Think the footage is fake. Think we are weak. Think we are cowards. I do not care what you think. There we go, Rax said with satisfaction. Finally, some real emotion. Though I notice you still have not actually denied that humans are weaker than other species. I have not confirmed it either, Jake replied. True, Rax said, but the burden of proof is on you. If humans are as capable as that footage suggests, then prove it. Show us something extraordinary. Show us why we should believe that one human can really do what 10 soldiers from other species cannot. Jake stared at him for a long moment. Around them, the crowd waited to see what would happen. Some of the cadets looked excited about the challenge. Others looked worried about what Rax was demanding. I am not here to put on a show for you, Jake said finally. I am here to learn. How disappointing, Rax said. Though I suppose it proves my point. When challenged to back up the legends about their species, humans make excuses. Jake turned to walk away, but Rax was not finished. Tell me, Morrison, he called out. If you were really in the same situation as that soldier in the footage, what would you do? Would you run away? Would you hide? Or would you magically transform into some kind of superhero? Jake stopped walking. He thought about Kepler Station again, about the terror he had felt, about the way time seemed to slow down when people were depending on him. He thought about the wounded soldiers he had carried to safety, about the desperate plans he had made up on the spot, about the enemy fighters he had faced with nothing but determination and fear. I would do whatever needed to be done, he said without turning around, even if it meant dying. Jake was quiet for several seconds. The hallway was completely silent now. Even cadets who had been walking by stopped to listen. Especially if it meant dying, Jake said softly. He started walking again, leaving Rax and the crowd behind. As he moved down the hallway, he could hear whispered conversations starting up again. Some of the cadets were talking about what he had said. Others were discussing the footage they had seen in class. A few were arguing about whether humans really were different from other species. Jake did not care about any of it anymore. He just wanted to get to his room, close the door, and forget about the whole day. But as he walked, he could not shake the feeling that everything had just changed. The questions Rax had asked, the way the other cadets had looked at him, the expectations he could see in their eyes, it all meant that staying invisible was going to be much harder from now on. When Jake finally reached his small room, he sat down on his bed and put his head in his hands. He had come to the academy hoping to prove that humans could fit in quietly with other species. Instead, he was becoming exactly what he had hoped to avoid. A representative of his entire species, carrying the weight of every story and legend that had ever been told about humans. The next morning, Jake woke up hoping yesterday had been a bad dream. But when he walked to the dining hall for breakfast, he knew nothing had changed. Conversation stopped when he entered the room. Cadets turned to stare at him, then quickly looked away when he noticed. Some whispered to their friends while pointing in his direction. Jake got his food and sat at an empty table near the back corner. He always sat alone during meals. It was easier that way. But today was different. Today other cadets kept looking at him like he was some kind of puzzle they were trying to solve. After a few minutes, Kira approached his table. The Zephyrian cadet carried her tray carefully with her thin, long fingers. Her species was known for being gentle and thoughtful, which made them good diplomats. May I sit with you? She asked politely. Jake nodded. He was not sure if he wanted company, but Kira had been kind to him in the hallway yesterday. She had defended the footage when Rax called it fake. I have been thinking about what happened yesterday, Kira said as she sat down. About the footage and about what Rax said to you. What about it? Jake asked, taking a bite of his breakfast. The food at the academy was designed to be safe for all species, which meant it was usually bland and boring. I think Rax was wrong, Kira said. Not just about the footage being fake, but about humans not being special. Jake almost choked on his food. What do you mean? I have been studying galactic history since I arrived here, Kira explained. Every species has stories about great heroes and impossible victories. But human stories are different. How are they different? Jake asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Other species tell stories about individuals who were born special. They had rare gifts or magic powers or were chosen by gods. But human stories are about ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things. Jake set down his fork. I do not understand. In Veltarian legends, heroes are always from the noble class. They are trained from birth to be warriors. In Caraxian tales, heroes have special abilities that normal people do not have. But in human stories, heroes are farmers and teachers and shop workers who decide to help others when the time comes. Jake thought about this. He remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell him when he was young. Stories about firefighters who ran into burning buildings, and doctors who traveled to dangerous places to help sick people, and ordinary citizens who stood up to bullies and criminals. Maybe that is just how humans like to tell stories, Jake said. Or maybe, Kira replied, it tells us something true about how humans think. Maybe you really do believe that anyone can be a hero if they choose to be. Before Jake could respond, another cadet appeared at their table. It was Dex, the Caraxian who had been talking about the footage yesterday. He was breathing hard like he had been running. Morrison, he said urgently, you need to come with me now. Why? Jake asked. What is wrong? There is a fight in the training room, Dex explained. Rax is beating up Lynn. He says he is proving that weak species do not belong at the academy. Jake stood up immediately. Lynn was one of the smallest cadets in their class. The Altherian was smart and kind, but not built for physical combat. If Rax was really hurting him, someone needed to stop it. Where are the instructors? Kira asked. Morning briefing, Dex said. They will not be back for 30 minutes. By then, Lynn could be seriously hurt. Jake was already moving toward the door. Kira and Dex followed him. As they walked quickly through the hallways, Dex explained what had happened. Lynn made a comment about the footage yesterday. He said he thought it was inspiring to see someone fight so hard to protect others. Rax heard him and got angry. He challenged Lynn to a sparring match to prove that weak species should not have opinions about combat. But sparring matches are supposed to be supervised, Kira said, and they are supposed to be fair fights between similar-sized opponents. Rax does not care about rules, Dex replied. He dragged Lynn to the training room and locked the door. Some other cadets are outside trying to get in, but the door's sealed from the inside. They reached the training room and found a crowd of worried cadets standing outside. Jake could hear sounds of fighting from inside, along with Lynn's voice calling for help. How long has this been going on? Jake asked. About 10 minutes, said Zara, a Caraxian cadet from Jake's tactical theory class. We tried to call for help, but our communicators are not working. Something is blocking the signal. Jake examined the door. It was made of thick metal and designed to keep training weapons from accidentally hurting people in the hallway. The control panel showed a red light, which meant it was locked from the inside. Can we break it down? Jake asked. We tried, Zara said. It is too strong. We would need heavy equipment. From inside the room, they heard a loud crash followed by Lynn crying out in pain. The sound made Jake's heart race. Someone was getting hurt, and everyone was just standing around talking about it. Move back, Jake said suddenly. What are you going to do? Dex asked. Jake did not answer. He was looking at the door, but also at the wall next to it. Academy buildings were designed to be strong, but they were also designed to be repaired quickly when training accidents happened. That meant some parts were stronger than others. Jake ran at the wall next to the door and hit it with his shoulder. Pain shot through his arm, but he felt the wall give slightly. It was made of lighter material than the door. Are you crazy? Zara asked. You will hurt yourself. Jake ignored her and hit the wall again. This time a small crack appeared. He stepped back and kicked the wall as hard as he could. The crack got bigger. Help me, he said to the other cadets. Help you what? Dex asked. Break through the wall. The cadets looked at each other uncertainly. What Jake was suggesting was against Academy rules. Damaging Academy property could get them all in serious trouble. Another scream came from inside the training room. This time it sounded like Lynn was really hurt. Forget the rules, Kira said suddenly. She moved to stand next to Jake. What do you need us to do? Within seconds, 5 cadets were hitting and kicking the wall. Jake directed them to focus on the same spot where the crack had started. Their different species had different strengths. Dex was very strong. Zara was fast. Kira was precise. Together they made the crack bigger and bigger. Inside the training room, the sounds of fighting stopped. Then they heard Rax's voice, angry and loud. You think you are tough because you can take a beating? Let me show you what real strength looks like. There was another crash, louder than before. Hurry, Jake said, kicking the wall harder. His foot was starting to hurt, but he did not care. Finally, the wall gave way. A hole opened up big enough for someone to crawl through. Jake went first, squeezing through the opening and dropping into the training room. What he saw made him angry. Lynn was on the floor, curled up and holding his arm. There was blue blood on his face and his uniform was torn. Rax stood over him, holding a training weapon that was supposed to be set to safe mode, but Jake could see that the settings had been changed. The weapon was now dangerous enough to cause real damage. "Get away from him," Jake said. Rax turned around, surprised. "How did you get in here?" "That does not matter," Jake replied. "Step away from Lin, now." Rax laughed. "Or what, you will make me?" "You are just as weak as he is." Jake looked at Lin, who was trying not to cry. The Altherian's arm was definitely broken, and there were cuts on his face that would need medical attention. This was not a fair fight or even a training exercise. This was bullying, pure and simple. "I am giving you one chance to stop this," Jake said to Rax. "Walk away now and we can forget this happened." "How generous of you," Rax sneered. "But I am not finished teaching this lesson. Weak species need to learn their place." Jake felt something change inside him. It was the same feeling he had experienced at Kepler Station. Time seemed to slow down. His vision became clearer. He could see exactly where Rax was standing, how he was holding the weapon where his balance was weakest. "You want to teach lessons about strength?" Jake asked, his voice becoming very calm. "Fine, let me teach you one." Rax raised the training weapon, but Jake was already moving. He dove to the side, rolled, and came up next to Rax before the Veltarian could react. Jake grabbed two of Rax's forearms and used the upperclassman's own momentum to throw him across the room. Rax hit the wall hard and dropped the weapon. He got up quickly, angry and embarrassed. "You got lucky," he snarled and charged at Jake. What happened next was over very quickly. Jake sidestepped Rax's charge, grabbed one of his arms, and flipped him onto his back. When Rax tried to get up, Jake pinned him down with moves that none of the watching cadets recognized. "This is over," Jake said. "Do not make me hurt you." Rax struggled for a few seconds, then stopped. He could not move with Jake holding him down, and every time he tried, Jake's grip got tighter. "Let me up," Rax demanded. "Not until you promise to leave Lin alone," Jake replied. "And not until you admit that picking on someone smaller than you does not make you strong. I do not have to promise anything to a human." Jake's grip tightened slightly. "Yes, you do. Because right now this human is stronger than you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rax said quietly, "Fine, I promise." 3 days after the fight with Rax, things at the academy had changed. News of what happened in the training room spread quickly. Some cadets looked at Jake with new respect. Others seemed nervous around him. A few avoided him completely. Jake tried to go back to his normal routine, but it was impossible. In every class, he could feel eyes watching him. When he walked down hallways, conversation stopped. Even the instructors seemed to notice him more than before. The biggest change was that other cadets started talking to him. Not just Kira and Dex, but students he had never spoken to before. They asked questions about humans, about Earth, about whether all humans could fight like he had fought Rax. Jake tried to give normal answers, but every response seemed to make them more curious. He was starting to understand how animals in zoos must feel. On Thursday morning, Professor Zekthera announced that their tactical theory class would be doing a practical exercise. "Today you will work in teams to solve a combat simulation," she explained. "This is not a test, but it will count toward your final grade." The cadets were divided into mixed groups of 5. Jake found himself paired with Zara as team leader, 2 Altherian engineer cadets named Ben and Sarah, and a Veltarian communications specialist named Cole. "The scenario is simple," Professor Zekthara continued. "Enemy forces have taken hostages in a heavily defended building. Your job is to rescue the hostages with minimal casualties. You have standard equipment and 1 hour to complete the mission." Jake's team gathered around a holographic display that showed the building layout. It was 3 stories tall with narrow windows and only 2 entrances. Enemy positions were marked in red. Hostages were marked in blue. The setup looked almost impossible. "This is going to be tough," Zara said, studying the display. "They have high ground, good sightlines, and superior numbers." Ben nodded nervously. "The front entrance is completely exposed. Anyone who tries to go through there will be shot immediately." "What about the back entrance?" Sarah asked. Cole checked his communication equipment. "It is blocked by debris. We would need explosives to clear it, and that would alert every enemy in the building." Jake studied the hologram quietly while his teammates discussed different approaches. None of their ideas would work. The enemy had set up their defenses too well. Any conventional attack would result in heavy casualties, both for the rescue team and for the hostages. "What do you think, Jake?" Zara asked. You have been very quiet. Jake looked at the building again. He was starting to see possibilities that the others had missed. Weak points in the enemy positions. Blind spots they had not covered. Ways to turn the building's layout against them instead of in their favor. I think we are approaching this wrong, Jake said slowly. What do you mean? Ben asked. We are trying to fight our way in, Jake explained. But what if we make them come out instead? How? Sarah wanted to know. Jake pointed to different parts of the hologram. The building has 3 floors, but the hostages are all on the 2nd floor. The enemies are spread out to cover all possible approaches. That means they are not concentrated anywhere. So? Cole asked. So we can use that against them, Jake said. His voice was getting more confident as the plan formed in his mind. Ben, can you create a small explosion on the 1st floor? Something that looks like we are trying to break in through the back? Probably, Ben replied. But that will bring enemies down to investigate. Exactly, Jake said. While they are distracted downstairs, Sarah can cut through the side wall on the 2nd floor. These buildings are designed for quick repairs, so the walls should not be too thick. Sarah looked uncertain. That could work. But what about the enemies who stay on the 2nd floor? They will see us coming through the wall. Not if they are looking somewhere else, Jake said. Cole, can you jam their communications and make it look like the signal is coming from the roof? Cole's eyes lit up with understanding. Yes. If I do it right, they will think we are planning to attack from above. And while they are watching the roof and investigating the explosion downstairs, Zara said, catching on to the plan, we rescue the hostages through the side wall. That is the idea, Jake confirmed. But we have to time everything perfectly. If any part of the plan fails, the hostages could get hurt. The team spent the next 20 minutes working out the details. Jake found himself naturally taking charge, even though Zara was supposed to be the leader. He assigned specific tasks to each team member and created backup plans in case something went wrong. When they entered the simulation chamber, Jake felt the familiar sensation he had experienced during the fight with Rax. Time seemed to slow down. His awareness became sharper. He could process multiple variables at once without getting confused. The simulation began. Ben set off his explosion exactly on schedule. Cole started jamming enemy communications while making it look like the interference came from above. Sarah began cutting through the side wall with tools the engineers had brought. Jake watched the enemy positions on his scanner. Just as he had predicted, several guards left the 2nd floor to investigate the explosion. Others moved to defensive positions facing the roof. Now, Jake whispered into his communicator. The team moved through the hole Sarah had cut. They reached the first group of hostages without being detected. But as they were helping the hostages to safety, something went wrong. One of the enemy guards spotted them. He raised his weapon to fire at the rescued hostages. Jake reacted without thinking. He threw himself between the guard and the hostages, taking the simulated weapon fire meant for them. Jake is down, Zara reported. Heavy damage, but Jake was not done. Even with his armor systems showing critical damage, he continued to coordinate the rescue. He directed Cole to create a diversion, while Ben and Sarah evacuated the remaining hostages. When more enemies appeared, Jake used debris in the room to create cover for his teammates. The simulation ended with all hostages rescued and 0 hostage casualties. Jake's character had been severely wounded, but he had continued fighting until the mission was complete. When they exited the simulation chamber, Professor Zekthara was waiting for them with a very strange expression on her face. Interesting approach, she said, looking directly at Jake. Very unconventional tactics. Where did you learn to coordinate a mission like that? I just tried to think about what would work, Jake replied. Standard approaches were not going to succeed, so we needed to try something different. And the decision to put yourself between the enemy and the hostages, Professor Zekthara continued. That was not tactically sound. You could have found cover instead. The hostages could not find cover, Jake said simply. Someone had to protect them. Professor Zekthara studied him for a long moment. Then she pulled up the tactical analysis on her tablet. Your team completed the mission with a 97% success rating. That is the highest score this simulation has ever recorded. The other teams had gathered around to hear the results. When they heard Jake's team's score, several cadets whistled in amazement. More interesting, Professor Zekthara continued, is the tactical pattern analysis. The computer compared your approach to historical combat data from the past 10 years. She paused and looked around at all the assembled cadets. The tactics used in this simulation match almost exactly with those employed during the siege of Kepler Station. The room went completely silent. Every cadet turned to stare at Jake. Professor Zekthera pulled up the comparison data on the main display. Unconventional use of explosives to create diversions, exploiting enemy overconfidence in defensive positions, coordinated multi-pronged attacks designed to confuse rather than overpower, and most significantly, willingness to accept personal risk to protect non-combatants. Jake felt his heart start beating faster. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. The comparison was too obvious to ignore. "Professor," Zara said slowly, "are you saying that Jake used the same tactics as the human soldier in the footage?" "I am saying," Professor Zekthera replied, "that either this cadet has studied the Kepler Station recordings very carefully, or there is something else we need to discuss." She pulled up more data on her display. Computers show biographical information for the Kepler Station defender. Text appeared on the screen. Most of it was classified, but one piece of information was clearly visible. The soldier's name, Private Jake Morrison, 47th Colonial Defense Unit. Jake watched as every eye in the room moved from the display to his face and back again. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, Ben spoke in a whisper that everyone could hear. "Morrison. Your name is Morrison." "Jake Morrison," Sarah added, her voice filled with awe. Cole looked at the display, then at Jake, then back at the display. "You are him," he said. "You are the soldier from the footage." Jake stood very still, feeling the weight of dozens of stares. There was no point in denying it anymore. The evidence was too clear. "Yes," he said quietly, "I am." The room erupted in excited whispers and gasps of amazement. Some cadets stepped closer to get a better look at him. Others stepped back as if they were suddenly afraid. Professor Zekthera raised her hand for silence. "I think," she said, "we need to have a longer conversation about this." Class dismissed. "Cadet Morrison, please remain behind." By the next morning, everyone at the academy knew who Jake really was. Word had spread through the dormitories like fire through dry grass. When Jake walked to breakfast, conversations stopped completely. Cadets stood up from their tables to get a better look at him. Some pointed and whispered. Others just stared in silence. Jake got his food and looked around for somewhere to sit. His usual table in the back corner was surrounded by other cadets who were clearly hoping he would join them. He had never been popular before, and he did not like the feeling now. "Jake!" called a familiar voice. It was Kira waving at him from a table near the windows. "Come sit with us." Jake walked over and found Kira sitting with Zara, Dex, Ben, Sarah, and Cole. They were the cadets he had worked with most closely since arriving at the academy. They looked excited but also nervous. "So," Dex said as Jake sat down, "you are really him, the hero of Kepler Station." "I am not a hero," Jake said automatically. "I just did what needed to be done." "You saved 3,000 people," Sarah pointed out. "If that does not make you a hero, what does?" Jake poked at his breakfast without eating it. "Heroes are people who choose to be brave. I was just scared and desperate." "But you still acted," Ben said. "Even though you were scared, you still helped people." "Anyone would have done the same thing," Jake replied. "No," Zara said firmly. "They would not have. I have studied that battle extensively since yesterday. Military experts from a dozen species have analyzed the footage. None of them could have done what you did." Jake looked up at his friends. "You all seem different now that you know. You are looking at me like I am some kind of alien creature." "We are looking at you with respect," Kira said gently. "There is a difference." "I do not want respect," Jake said. "I want to be treated normally." "But you are not normal," Dex pointed out. "What you did was extraordinary." "What I did was survive," Jake corrected. "And help other people survive. That is what humans do." Cole leaned forward with interest. "Is that really what all humans do? Act without thinking about personal safety when others are in danger?" Jake thought about this question seriously. He remembered stories from Earth about people running into burning buildings to save strangers, about doctors working in war zones, about teachers protecting their students during attacks. "Not all humans," he said finally. "But most of us have a hard time watching other people suffer when we might be able to help." "Even if helping means risking your own life?" Ben asked. "Especially then," Jake replied. "If someone is going to die and you are the only one who can save them, How do you choose not to try? The cadets at the table looked at each other with amazement. This was clearly a new way of thinking for most of them. In Veltarian culture, Cole said, we calculate the odds before acting. If the risk is too high, we find another approach. In Caraxian society, Dex added, we protect our own family groups first. Strangers come second. Altherians believe in careful planning, Sarah said. We study problems for a long time before deciding what to do. Jake listened to all of this and shook his head. Those are all smart approaches. But sometimes there is no time for calculation or planning. Sometimes someone is going to die in the next 30 seconds and you have to choose whether to help them or not. And humans choose to help, Kira said. It was not a question. Most of the time, yes, Jake confirmed. Even when it is stupid. Even when it might get us killed. Why? Ben asked. What makes humans willing to take such risks? Jake was quiet for a moment, trying to put his feelings into words. I think it is because we believe that every life matters. Not just human lives, but all lives. When I see someone in trouble, something inside me says that their life is worth protecting, even if protecting it is dangerous. But that makes no logical sense, Cole pointed out. One life trading for another life is not a gain. It is not about logic, Jake said. It is about conscience. About doing what feels right instead of what makes sense mathematically. Zara leaned back in her chair. This explains so much about human military tactics. You do not fight like other species because you are not trying to win efficiently. You are trying to save as many people as possible. Sometimes those are the same thing, Jake replied. Sometimes the best way to win is to make sure everyone goes home alive. The conversation was interrupted when Professor Zekthara approached their table. Good morning, cadets, she said. Jake, I was hoping to speak with you privately. Jake followed the professor to a quiet corner of the dining hall. She looked serious but not angry. I have been contacted by Academy leadership, she said. Word of your identity has reached the highest levels of command. They want to meet with you. Am I in trouble? Jake asked. Not at all, Professor Zekthara assured him. But they have questions. About Kepler Station, about human military doctrine, about why you chose to hide your identity here. Jake nodded. He had been expecting this conversation eventually. When do they want to see me? This afternoon. But first I wanted to ask you something personal. She paused. Do you regret coming here? Do you wish you had stayed on a human world where your identity would not matter? Jake thought about this carefully. 3 months ago he would have said yes immediately. But now, looking around at the cadets who had become his friends, he was not so sure. I used to think I wanted to be invisible, he said. I thought that if nobody knew who I was, I could just be another student. But I think I was wrong. How so? Because hiding who I am meant hiding what humans are capable of, and maybe other species need to know that. Not because humans are better than anyone else, but because we think about things differently. Professor Zekthara smiled. That is a very mature perspective. What changed your mind? Jake looked back at his table, where his friends were still discussing human psychology and behavior. I realized that understanding each other is more important than fitting in. If my classmates can learn something useful from human approaches to problems, then maybe sharing my experience is worth the attention. And if they expect you to be superhuman now, then I will show them that being human is enough, Jake replied. I will show them that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when the situation demands it. That afternoon, Jake met with the Academy leadership as scheduled. The meeting lasted 3 hours and covered everything from his actions at Kepler Station to his observations about interspecies cooperation. When it was over, the admirals and generals thanked him for his honesty and dismissed him with a promise to discuss new training protocols based on human tactical approaches. When Jake returned to his dormitory that evening, he found a group of cadets waiting outside his room. Not just his friends, but students from every species represented at the Academy. They looked nervous but determined. We have been talking, Zara said, speaking for the group, about what you said this morning. About humans choosing to help others even when it is dangerous. What about it? Jake asked. We want to learn, Kira said. We want to understand how to think like that. How to put others before ourselves when it matters. We want you to teach us, Dex added. Not just about human tactics, but about human values. Jake looked at all the faces staring at him hopefully. Veltarians and Caraxians and Altherians and Zephyrians all wanting to learn from him. A few months ago, this would have been his worst nightmare. Now it felt like an opportunity. I cannot teach you to be human, he said, but I can share what I have learned about helping others. That is all we ask, Ben said. Jake opened his door and gestured for everyone to come inside. His small room was not big enough for so many cadets, but they made it work. Some sat on his bed, others on the floor, and a few stood against the walls. Before we start, Jake said, I want you all to understand something. What I did at Kepler Station was not magic. It was not because I am special or because humans are naturally superior. It was because I was in a situation where people needed help, and I could not live with myself if I did not try to give it. But how do you overcome the fear? Cole asked. How do you act when everything in your mind is telling you to run away? You do not overcome the fear, Jake explained. You act despite the fear. You ask yourself what is more important, your safety or someone else's life. When the answer is clear, the choice becomes easier. Even if you might die. Sarah wanted to know. Especially if you might die, Jake replied, because that is when the choice matters most. For the next 2 hours, Jake talked about decision-making under pressure, about putting others first, about finding courage when everything seems hopeless. His classmates asked dozens of questions and shared examples from their own cultures. As the evening went on, Jake realized something important. He was not just teaching them about human values. They were teaching him about their own species' strengths, Felterian logic, Caraxian loyalty, Altherian precision, Zephyrian wisdom. All of these could be combined with human determination to create something new. You know what I think? Jake said as the impromptu lesson was winding down. I think every species has the capacity for heroism. Humans might be more likely to charge into danger without thinking, but that is not the only way to help people. What do you mean? Zara asked. Veltarians can calculate the best ways to save the most people. Caraxians can inspire incredible loyalty that makes others willing to sacrifice for the